So by 2007, what have we got? We got a working class completely freaked out. I mean that literally. My wife is a psychotherapist. I've been married to her for many, many years, and I have watched through her dinner time stories her description of the mental, how shall I put this politely, catastrophe of the American people. They can't. They can't handle the trauma of the end of what they were taught to expect. They're very bitter. Somebody screwed up here. Somebody is making all the things that were supposed to happen not happen. I'm working my ass off. I am exhausted. My family is falling apart because the person who used to hold the family together, the adult woman, is now working the same number of hours that her husband is, and she can't be the emotional glue to hold the family together, so it doesn't hold together. So we have 30 years of people running around the community saying, we need to return to family values. Why? Because the family is disintegrating on them. That's why. The stupid Democrats didn't figure this out. The Republicans saw an issue. They became the champions of the family that was disintegrating. Got a lot of votes like that. And finally, the working class reaches 2007, not only exhausted physically and stressed from the disintegration of the family, but anxiety-ridden about a level of debt it can't possibly sustain. So when things collapse, we're not talking about a little business cycle. We're talking about the entire history of this country bringing the mass of our people to a situation of extreme economic dysfunction. And as if that weren't enough, last point of this. If the productivity kept rising since the 1970s, which it did, workers were better educated, we had more machines, we had better machines, so the productivity kept going up, but the wages didn't. Okay, let's remember what it means. Productivity measures how much a worker in an hour gives the employer. That keeps going up. Real wage measures how much the employer gives to the worker. That doesn't go up anymore. That goes down. The gap between these two, that's called profits. And profits in the 1970s in American industry go mad. They explode. No mystery here at all, once you know where to look. But of course, where to look, you need a theory. It tells you where to look. That's what all theories are good for. They tell you where to look. So I'll tell you in a minute what theory I have that teaches me to look at these two numbers, these two lines. But this is the profits go crazy. And what does the business community in America do? It has its own different theory. What does it say? It notices that the profits are going nuts. And they're going nuts everywhere. Main Street, Wall Street, everywhere. Because all employers don't have to pay higher wages. Meanwhile, they're picking up rising productivity. So the theory of the business community, which shouldn't surprise you once I tell it to you, was different. Not the theory I'm just doing here. Here's their theory. We, the top managers of American business, are genius. We are possessed of a quality called entrepreneurship. We can't really spell it, but we know it's important. And we develop new heroes in our culture. Jack Welch, the head of GE. Remember? Lee Iacocca, head of Ford and Chrysler at Barrett. We develop cultural heroes, these geniuses. And of course, you know, you can see why it would make sense for them to have this theory. Because after all, if this explosion of profitability is about the genius of a top manager, what becomes reasonable? Paying him a lot becomes reasonable. This is the time when the salaries, the bonuses, the stock options of America's top managers go nuts. 2 years ago, it was a hot issue in America. My God, and the American people were angry at the huge bonuses that Goldman Sachs. Look, I was really happy that the American people were angry. They were just 30 years late to be angry. They were discovering something even later than normally the American press discovers it. Every time capitalism produces a profit explosion like this, the people who get the profits, the corporations, begin to spin out of control with wild speculation. In the 1990s, as this was happening, they decided the internet was going to revolutionize everything. And they bought stocks in companies that had never made any profit. If you know the history of the stock market explosion from 1993 to 2000, people went crazy and it all blew up. When that passed, real estate, the same thing. It's people with an immense amount of money. So much wealth was made, so many salaries ballooned, that we developed a whole new industry. An industry of special companies that go to very rich people floating in money and say to them, you know, I will invest your money in a clever way. You're too stupid and too busy to be able to do it. But you give me your money, I know how to do it. You know what these things are called? Hedge funds. That's all this is. A hedge fund. So we have this entire structure. Because of what? Because of the disjunction between productivity and real wages. Now, a little number. For tonight, I went to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS.gov, if you want to find all these statistics are there. That's part of the United States Department of Labor. It's the statistical branch of the United States government that produces all these numbers. And I compared over the last year, July 2009 to July 2010, a month ago. Here's what, just in case you were wondering whether this situation had changed. Here we go. Productivity, output per hour per worker's hour, went up 3.7%. Very impressive, in 1 year. Now let's see what happened to the real wages of the American workers according to the BLS from July 09 to July 10. Down by 2.8%. Let's do that again. What we delivered to the employer where we worked went up by 3.7%, and what he paid us for doing this nice job was 2.8% less than the year before. At this point, I really ought to have a moment's pause and play you the national anthem. Because a society that can do this, can keep doing this for 30 years, is a society in which the working class has lost the capacity to act. It just sits there and feels bad and watches another hour of television and maybe a little porno to recoup a sense of loss that is real. Or maybe it'll go to a tea bag or tea party rally. Tea party rally, because it's at least a way of expressing anger. Anger about a situation that really is extraordinary. Sometimes, some of you have heard me talk about a kind of a Marxist approach, a footnote. Why do I look at productivity and wages? Because that's what Marxism taught me to do. I didn't learn Marxism in an American university, even though I went to what I consider to be very good universities here in the United States. Nobody taught me any Marxism in them. I learned that on my own, but Marxist theory is that the worker produces for the boss something called a surplus. And the boss's surplus is larger the less he pays the workers. Not a very complicated idea, but Marx really ran with this thing, and I thought this was very clever, so that made me look at these numbers, and I was able to put together a Marxist interpretation of the crisis and how it comes to the fore. In this kind of a situation, a Marxist argument might be, gee, what could we do that might have prevented this from happening? And here's a thought just to take with you. Suppose workers didn't just come to work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, and do the work, and then go home and leave behind the work that they produced for the employer to sell and make money. Suppose we reorganized enterprises so that the board of directors, the decision about what to produce, how to produce, what to do with the profits, was not made by a board of directors and shareholders, but was made by the workers who work in the plant. Cooperative, community, socialist, communist, whatever words you want. But you all know what I mean. Here's one thing that would have been different. The one thing, American history. Why? Because here's one thing we can be sure of. In the 1970s, as the productivity of workers went up, if the enterprises of America had been run by the workers in them, this line would not have gone down. no way that would have happened. And if it hadn't, they wouldn't have had to borrow that money, and they wouldn't have had to exhaust themselves in 2 and 3 jobs for everybody in the family. Our history would have been completely different. But in order to see that, you have to do it in analytic. You have to face a crisis in these kinds of forms. Last thing, and then we'll open up the conversation. One of the effects of this kind of a situation is that these people's lives get more and more difficult.